Okay, hello again. We're going to continue talking about basic concepts of digital recording and several key things that we'll be looking at here or activities in the audio production process. First of all, I'll say that this discussion is based on the textbook Digital Audio Production by Donald W. Conley, third edition, as our other conversations have been. And recommend that you review that textbook and see what more there is for you to study. Mixing, this is something that you already have been involved in, but we'll now talk a little specifically about it. This is adjusting the audio levels on each track and then blending them. So in the projects that you already have done, you have several different parts. You have voice parts and music beds and sound effects, and you have positioned those in various tracks and then adjusted the level of each of those for a final mix down. So this is what you do in the multi-track mode of Adobe Audition. And of course, we call it the session. So you're already familiar with this process. There are 5 elements involved in mixing. There is the balance, and sometimes in the comments that I give you on a project that you've done, I'll refer to the voice music balance, meaning the level of the voice and the music relative to each other. So music, sound effects, voice, how are those relatively in terms of amplitude or volume, how are they related to each other? And the voice usually should be prominent. There might be some situation where, for whatever reason, it was not, but almost always the voice is higher than, more prominent than the music or the sound effects, and that's called the balance. The sonic panorama has to do with whether things are positioned to the left or right. There is a control within Adobe Audition in the multi-track mode called pan. And there's a line right in the center of the track, and it allows you to move things to the left track or to the right track. I recommend that you leave it alone. There's not many occasions, maybe some very creative situations where you want something on the left or you want something on the right. But more often than not, you'll cause more harm than anything else if you start playing with that. But maybe in particular if you're producing a play, a radio or audio play, and you wanted someone to sound as if they were walking into the room from the left and then exiting the room from the right or something like that, you might do that. But by and large, we leave the pan in the center position where things are equally balanced between left and right. Equalization. Now, we're going to talk more about this coming up, but equalization is an effect that makes certain elements brighter or clearer, and we haven't really discussed this very much, but as I say, we're going to get into that, and we'll discuss it coming up. And then the dimension is something else that we will talk about, has to do a lot with reverb, and reverb is related to and is similar to echo, which is a term you're probably more familiar with, or delay. But there's all kinds of things that you can do with your voice in effects, and I may show you that in Adobe Audition here, just show you where these things are in a moment. But we're gonna discuss these more in the near future. And then dynamics, the difference between the softest and the loudest sound. This is affected by compression and limiting and gating. Again, you find these in effects in Adobe Audition, and compression, limiting, and gating are used to control the dynamics, the difference in the softest and the loudest sound. Now, this is something that would be primarily of more effect and more use in producing music, and in particular classical music. But but music, would be more concerned with dynamics. Let me bring up Adobe Audition here just for a moment. This is a very brief recording of myself in a project that I was doing, and I don't know that I need to play this for you right now, but we've been talking about some of these different effects. So equalization in Adobe Audition, you see here a control under effects that says filter and EQ. And there's the FFT filter, parametric equalizer. You would find those things there. And then we talked about reverb, and we talked about echo, but and some other aspects of this, but there's where you would find reverb. And I could perhaps, let's choose reverb here and put it on my voice. Well, you see a big change there.
This day in history, October 26th, 1881, in Tombstone, Arizona.
So that's an unusual sound to it. And then we might also hear, having done this, we would limit it. You see how much it forces up the amplitude, so I would limit it here to -6 dB.
This day in history, October 26th, 1881.
So that's a particular reverb effect. We might go to here and choose another reverb effect, studio reverb. A lot of this is intended for music production and instruments. Vocal reverb, large. We'll choose the large. See what this sounds like.
This day in history, October 26th, 1881, in Tombstone, Arizona.
And you hear the echo-like effect there. So I'm going to undo the studio reverb, undo everything that I've done here, and go back to the original voice, and you'll see how much different it sounds.
This day in history, October 26th, 1881, in Tombstone, Arizona.
So reverb is something that you can have some fun with, for sure. It depends on the situation as to whether it's appropriate or not, but we're going to talk more about that. EQ and compression, or limiting and gating, require experience. Using equalization requires experience and can cause harm to the recording if used improperly. By harm, I mean that in effect you would make your recording less listenable, and might make it really worse in terms of achieving the goal of the recording. I'm thinking here especially about producing commercials for clients, and you might get very creative, but it might not help them sell the product or the service. So you need to be careful in using EQ and the various different aspects of EQ. Here's a very good video, and I'm going to get back into my presentation mode here. And a very good video here on effects in Adobe Audition.
Hello, I'm Mike Russell from musicradiocreative.com. In this video, we're going to get rid of muffling like this.
You got to work on this a little bit more, or this looks good, this does not, and here's why.
And we're going to make it sound like this.
You got to work on this a little bit more, or this looks good, this does not.
So here we are in Adobe Audition, and
people that I regularly ask feedback of.
Rather muffled, a little bit of reverb going on there from the room it's recorded
But
in.
of those, there's a couple that I know that will just tell me straight up that,
very low end focused, very just not the best. So let's enhance the quality of this. Let's actually copy this into a new file so we can play with it. And I'm going to go ahead and first of all, break open filter and EQ, parametric equalizer. And the first thing I'm going to do with this is add a high pass filter, removing any of that low end. Let's try now.
People that I regularly ask.
Okay, I'm gonna pull that back just for a second so you can see again where he went to get that. I kind of showed you something similar a moment ago, but you can look at this again.
And I'm going to go ahead and first of all,
So he's in effects in Adobe Audition, and then he's gone to delay and echo. We were in reverb here a few moments ago, so I'll continue. But that he went to effects to find this.
break open, filter and EQ, parametric equalizer. And the first thing I'm going to do with this is add a high pass filter, removing any of that low end. Let's try now.
People that I regularly ask feedback of, but of those, there's a couple that I know that will just.
All right, so instantly we're removing that muffled, that bassy, that low end sound just by adding in the high pass filter and pushing it up above around 164 hertz here. Let's switch off.
People that I regularly ask feedback of.
And then on.
People that I regularly ask feedback of.
And the next thing we'll do is we'll enhance the high end by changing this icon here and pushing the high end up.
People that I regularly ask feedback of, but of those, there's a couple that I know that will just tell me straight up that,
Now we can still hear that kind of reverby sound, that kind of echo sound that's going on there. So this is where we can now notch up 0.3, make the Q width 16 and scan through for some of those boxy muffled sounds.
People that I regularly ask feedback of, but of those, there's a couple that I know that will just tell me straight up that,
Right there, we've got a boxy sound that we can pull right out.
People that I regularly ask feedback of.
Let's do that with point number 4. Again, changing the Q width to 16 here, scanning through.
People that I regularly ask feedback of, but of those, there's a couple that I know that will just tell me straight up that.
There's the boxy sound, and we'll remove it like that.
People that I regularly ask feedback of, but of those, there's a couple.
Okay,
that
we're
I
going to
know
add
that will just tell
also
me.
a low pass filter onto the top here. As we can see, a lot of stuff above around 10,000 or 12,000 hertz not happening at all. So let's pull this down. Let's change this a little bit so it's a tighter drop off and bring that in there.
Will just tell me straight up that, hey, this, you got to work on this a little bit more, or this looks good, this does not. And
I'm going to pause this again. I will show you. Obviously, I cannot open this. This is a video that we're looking at. But here where it says presets, you may want to work more in that area. He's obviously a master of audio production, and he's being very, very precise and specific in setting the various levels that he's setting here. But as you get into the equalizer, you will find that in the presets there may be something that probably is going to achieve what you want to achieve, and I would try that first. What he's showing you here is great, but it might be a little complicated, or might be a little more involve a little bit more art than each of us is quite prepared for. But just be aware that there are some presets that you can use.
here's why. And those kind of opinions are really valuable. And if
There we go. Okay, fantastic. Let's move that 4 down
will
again.
just tell me straight up that, hey, this.
And already sounding a lot better. We've removed that muffled sound. Let's remember what we started with.
People that I regularly ask feedback of.
And then what we've got now after a little bit of parametric EQ.
People that I regularly ask feedback of.
Now we're going to normalize it to make it louder. Favorites, normalize to minus 0.1 dB.
People that I regularly ask feedback of.
And then finally, to really eliminate that reverb that's still occurring in the room, we'll go into effects and we'll look for noise reduction restoration, de-reverb. And this is simply a 0 to 100% slider. Let's push it up. We don't want to go too high. We risk degrading the quality of the speech. So let's see what happens here.
People that I regularly ask feedback.
Okay, that's really degrading the quality of the speech. So let's go up to maybe 40% maximum.
People that I regularly ask feedback of, but of those, there's a couple that I know.
30% is good. Apply it. And then we'll remind ourselves we started with something like this.
You got to work on this a little bit more, or this looks good, this does not, and here's why. And
then we'll go over to the after.
you got to work on this a little bit more, or this looks good, this does not, and here's why.
So there you go. Just a few simple steps to remove muffled sound on speech and background reverb.
Okay, so very entertaining, I think, there to watch that. But and you see then very much what equalization is about, which is part of the mixing aspect of what we do, putting the various elements together for the final product. Now, again, we're gonna look more at this coming up, not today, but another time. Mastering is the final step, and this is the final tweaking and adjustments. And again, we're kind of thinking more so the major area in the broadcast area for audio production is the production of commercials. And we're leaving aside for now music production. But commercials, of course, should be played for clients' approval, and that's always done. That's the last step, and that's the mastering. Then the final tweaking and adjustment is getting it ready to play for the client. And as you know, for the mix down, then you mix down session to new file under multi-track, and then there may be some final things that you do, again, in the effects area, tweaking and adjustments, just to get it just almost perfect, if not perfect. And then in a radio station, a commercial will be transferred to a server, first of all, so it can be played on the air, as most broadcasting now takes place by drawing audio from a computer or something that is feeding to a computer, and a commercial will be transferred to a server so it can be played back probably via automation on the air, and then it will be, of course, sent as an MP3 by email, quite possibly, or perhaps on a flash drive if a salesperson is going to make a call in person on a client, so that it could be played in person for that client to hear. And then ultimately it is saved in an archive so that if we need it a year from now, 10 years from now, it's there and we can go back and find it. But that last stage is playing it for the satisfaction of the client. And a lot of times that may simply be done by emailing, or there may be some other online method for providing that for the client to hear. Okay, so that's kind of the latter stage of the process of producing, and especially commercials. And our producing of PSAs is pretty much equivalent to the production of commercials. So we will continue to talk about some of the things having to do with effects that you can do in audio production, and in particular on Adobe Audition, and we'll get to that next time. Thanks. We'll see you then.